My son sold my kidney for cash. And I woke up in my own basement while he counted it upstairs. That's not a metaphor. That's not anger exaggerating memory. That's what happened. If you're listening to me right now thinking, no child would do that, I used to believe that too. I raised him. I packed his lunches. I held his fevered forehead at 3 a.m. And I signed the papers he put in front of me. Let me tell you how I found out. When I opened my eyes, the first thing I noticed was the light. A long fluorescent strip, humming like an insect trapped in glass. Too bright for night. Too harsh for morning. The second thing was the floor. Concrete pulls heat out of your body fast. I could feel it through my blouse, except it wasn't my blouse. It was an oversized gray shirt that smelled faintly of detergent and something metallic underneath. Then I tried to move. That's when my side protested. Not a scream of pain. No. It was deeper than that. A hollow pressure, like someone had reached inside me and rearranged the shelves. My hand went there before my mind caught up. Thick gauze. Surgical tape. A clean closure under it. My mouth tasted sweet. Chamomile tea. Too sweet. I don't take sugar. I never have. I remember telling Marcus that when he handed me the mug. He laughed softly and said, "Just this once, Ma. Just this once." Upstairs, footsteps crossed the kitchen floorboards. Slow. Confident. No rush. Then I heard it. The crisp flick of bills being counted. If you've ever handled cash in silence, you know that rhythm. Thumb. Slide. Tap. Stack. 46, 47. Marcus's voice. Clear. Unbothered. I stayed still. I didn't panic. I didn't cry out. I listened. There's something about betrayal that sharpens your hearing. Every creak in that house felt amplified. The refrigerator cycling on. A cabinet door closing. The faint scrape of a chair leg. And then he laughed. Not nervous laughter. Not hysterical. Satisfied. You didn't need to anyway, he said. There was another voice with him. Lower. Older. I couldn't make out the words, just the tone, transactional. Businesslike. That's when the memory slid back into place. 2 nights earlier. Kitchen table. Papers spread in neat stacks. Marcus explaining that a specialist had recommended a preventative procedure because of family markers. I remember frowning at that phrase. Family markers for what? Noah died in a car accident. There was no genetic condition. Or, wait, I thought for a moment maybe it was something from my mother's side, but no. No, that didn't make sense either. I almost asked more questions. Almost. He made tea while I skimmed the forms. I remember the steam curling upward. I remember thinking the legal language felt dense but legitimate. I worked in medical billing for 27 years. I know the look of hospital paperwork. It looked right. He placed the pen in my hand. I signed. After the second sip of tea, my eyelids grew heavy. I thought it was fatigue. I'd been sorting old tax files that afternoon. Or maybe it was the antihistamines I took earlier for dust. No, I hadn't taken those yet. I keep them in the bathroom cabinet. I hadn't touched them. So it was the tea. Down in the basement, the fluorescent light flickered once and steadied. I pushed myself onto one elbow. The room tilted, but I forced it into focus. Shelving units. Plastic storage bins labeled in my handwriting. Holiday lights. Noah's tools. Marcus, school. My basement. Not a hospital. Not a clinic. My house. Whoever cut me open did it here. I sat up slowly. My breath shortened. My pulse thudded in my ears, but my mind felt strangely clear. If he'd done this in my home, he believed I wouldn't fight back. That thought settled over me heavier than the pain. I tried to stand and had to grab the metal shelf to steady myself. The cold steel bit into my palm. My legs trembled, but they held. Upstairs, the second voice said something I finally caught. Rafe doesn't do returns. Returns. Like I was merchandise. Marcus replied, doesn't matter. She'll recover. She'll recover. Not Mom. Not my name. She. I took one step toward the stairs. Then another. Each one careful. Measured. I didn't call out. Because the moment he knew I was awake, the situation would change. And I needed to understand it before I stepped into it. Halfway up, I paused. Not from weakness. From realization. My son hadn't panicked. He hadn't acted in desperation. He'd planned this. He'd drugged my tea. He'd brought a surgeon into my home. He'd negotiated a price. And he thought I would never trace the buyer. He thought I was just an aging woman with 2 kidneys and no leverage. He forgot something important. I may have lost an organ. But I was still his mother. And I knew exactly how he thought. What he didn't know was that the name I heard upstairs, Rafe, wasn't unfamiliar to me. And that changed everything. Before that night, before the tea tasted wrong, before I heard cash being counted above my head, my life was orderly in a way that comforted me. Not exciting. Just steady. The house was small but well kept. Red brick. Narrow hallway. The kind of place where you can hear someone open a cabinet from 2 rooms away. I liked that about it. Sound meant presence. Marcus had moved back in 8 months earlier. No, closer to 10. It was late spring when he carried his boxes up the steps. I remember because the azaleas were blooming and I had to shift one of the pots so he wouldn't trip. He said city rent was draining him. Said his consulting contracts were inconsistent. He used confident words, bridge period, pivot, scaling opportunity. I didn't understand all of it, but I understood strain. He set up his workspace in his old bedroom. 2 monitors. A sleek laptop. Wires tucked neatly along the wall like he was staging a showroom. At night, a blue glow slipped under his door and stretched across the hallway carpet. Tap. 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 Sometimes it went past midnight. I told myself he was ambitious. We fell into a rhythm quickly. Morning coffee in silence. He scrolled news on his phone, I watered the herbs by the sink. In the evenings, I cooked. Rice. Roasted vegetables. Fish when it was on sale. He complimented the meals often. Too often, maybe. At the time I thought he was being thoughtful. Looking back, I wonder if he was practicing persuasion. You ever notice how flattery lands differently when it's strategic? It warms you. Softens you. I believed something simple then, that if you create a safe harbor for your child, they won't burn the dock. I really believed that. Marcus had always been charming. Even as a boy, he could talk his way out of a missed assignment with a straight face. Once, in 5th grade, he convinced a teacher he'd turned in a project that he never actually completed. I found out later because the teacher called to compliment his confidence. I laughed about it at the time. Maybe I shouldn't have. Let me ask you something, have you ever dismissed a red flag because it looked like talent? Because I did. There were small shifts in him when he moved back home. Subtle. He took more phone calls outside on the porch. Lowered his voice when he passed my doorway. Once, I walked into the kitchen and he quickly flipped his laptop screen down. Client privacy, he said lightly. I nodded. That night, or maybe it was 2 weeks later, I found a business card tucked near the coffee maker. Thick paper. Embossed letters. Rafael Ortega. No title. Just a phone number. I assumed it was one of his tech contacts. I placed it on the counter and forgot about it. Or I thought I did. The thing about memory is that it stores details quietly. They sit there until a moment calls them forward. Marcus also began asking questions about my health. Casual ones at first. You still feeling good? You keeping up with your annual checkups? He'd lean against the doorway while I folded laundry. I appreciated the concern. I really did. He even scheduled a consultation for me, saying he'd found a specialist reviewing preventive procedures for women over 45. I remember correcting him, I was 48, not 45. He laughed and said, even better. The appointment never happened. He said the doctor rescheduled. I didn't push. There was one evening, about a week before the tea, when he stood too close while I washed dishes. He watched my reflection in the dark window. You trust me, right? He asked. I dried my hands slowly. Of course. He nodded once, satisfied. I didn't ask why he needed reassurance. That's the part that unsettles me now, not the surgery, not even the theft, but how carefully he tested the ground beneath me. And here's something else I haven't admitted until now. The house was in my name. Fully paid off. Noah and I worked for years to clear that mortgage. When Marcus moved back in, he never mentioned contributing toward long-term costs. Just groceries sometimes. Utilities occasionally. He once asked casually what the property would appraise for in the current market. Said he was curious about asset growth. I answered him. Why wouldn't I? Everything felt domestic. Safe. Predictable. But safety can be constructed. And I know, that by the time he handed me that tea, the plan had already been in motion for weeks. Maybe months. I didn't see urgency in him. I saw patience. And patience is harder to question. If you were in my position, stable home, grown child under your roof, no immediate crisis, would you have dug deeper? Would you have demanded paperwork line by line? Or would you have trusted the voice you raised? I trusted mine. That's what makes the basement harder to process. Because nothing in the house looked broken. Except the part of me he'd already decided to sell. The first thing that felt wrong wasn't the tea. It was the timing. Marcus brought up the procedure 3 nights before I woke up in the basement. We were at the kitchen table after dinner. Plates still stacked near the sink. The overhead light casting that yellow circle that makes everything look softer than it is. He didn't rush into it. He asked about my blood pressure first. Then about the slight back pain I'd mentioned weeks earlier. He listened closely. Too closely. You know, prevention is cheaper than treatment, he said, leaning back like he was presenting a business plan. There's a specialist reviewing early-stage renal risks for women in your age bracket. Renal. That word should have anchored me. I worked around medical codes for decades. Renal means kidneys. It wasn't unfamiliar. It wasn't abstract. And still, I didn't react strongly enough. I asked, since when do I have renal risks? He paused for a second, just a second, and said something about family indicators. Maternal side. A predisposition. I almost corrected him. My mother didn't have kidney issues. She had high blood pressure. There's a difference. Or was there something else? I tried to remember. For a moment I doubted my own memory. Maybe an aunt? No, that didn't sit right. I let it go. He had printed documents. Real letterhead. A medical logo at the top. Dense paragraphs about elective intervention and long-term outcome reduction. It looked official. Clinical. He placed them in front of me like a loan officer would. This just authorizes consultation and, if necessary, minor surgical correction. Minor. I ran my finger over the paper. The font was clean. No spelling errors. Signature lines clearly marked. I should have read every line. I didn't. Not because I'm careless, but because he was watching me read. There's a pressure in being observed while you process information. It speeds you up. Makes you skim. He stood and said he'd make tea. That part is clear. I remember the kettle whistle. I remember the way he stirred the cup slowly, back to me, shoulders relaxed. When he handed it over, the steam fogged my glasses slightly. Chamomile, he said. You need to relax more. It tasted off. Sweeter than usual. I told him that. He smiled. Just a little honey. Honey has a different thickness. This was granular. But I took another sip anyway. I wish I could say I felt something immediate. I didn't. The conversation continued. He explained projected benefits. He mentioned a name, Dr. Pike. Said the man was reputable. Pike. I'd never heard of him. At some point, my vision blurred. Not dramatically. Just around the edges. I remember blinking several times, thinking maybe I was more tired than I realized. I'll clean up, Marcus said gently. You go lie down. I started to stand and the room tilted. That's the last clear frame before darkness. Now here's where the unease crept in, not in the moment, but in the reconstruction. When I woke in the basement and replayed that night, I realized something. He never actually scheduled the procedure through my primary doctor. He never gave me a clinic address. He never showed me insurance confirmation. Everything flowed through him. All information. All contact. All paperwork. And then I remembered the business card near the coffee maker. Rafael Ortega. Rafe. The name I heard upstairs. That wasn't a specialist's name. That was a broker's name. I'd seen enough medical fraud cases pass through billing departments to recognize patterns. Independent intermediaries. Cash transactions. Private arrangements. My pulse steadied as I connected those dots. And then the final piece slipped into place. The house was paid off. No medical debt. No financial emergency. Which meant this wasn't survival. It was profit. Upstairs, in the present moment, the basement moment, I heard Marcus say, wire transfer clears tomorrow. Wire transfer. So not all cash. That meant accounts. Trails. Banks. That meant proof. Standing halfway up those stairs, holding the railing with a hand that trembled only slightly, I faced a choice. I could burst into that kitchen, demand answers, let rage take over. Or I could step back down. Stay quiet. Let him believe the drug still held me. Observe. Verify. Gather. Trust or confront. A mother's instinct screams to confront. But a woman who's been underestimated her whole life knows the value of silence. I turned around. Slowly. And went back down into the basement. Because I needed more than suspicion. I needed evidence. And I wasn't sure yet how far my own son was willing to go. I didn't go back down the stairs because I was afraid. I went back down because I needed my head clear. Concrete steadied me. The coolness helped. I sat on the bottom step and pressed my fingers gently around the bandage, testing the edges. Clean. Tight. No seep-through. Whoever operated on me wasn't reckless. That mattered. I forced myself to breathe evenly and listen. Upstairs, chairs scraped. Cabinet doors opened. The murmur of two men finishing business. Then I heard the back door open. Footsteps crossed the porch. A car engine turned over. Only one engine. So Marcus stayed. I waited another 5 minutes, maybe 7. It felt longer, but I didn't have a clock down there. My sense of time was thin. When the house went quiet, I climbed the stairs. Each step tugged at my side, but the pain was controlled. Surgical pain. Measured. The kitchen looked normal. That's what unsettled me most. The table wiped clean. The tea mugs rinsed and placed upside down near the sink. The paperwork gone. Marcus stood at the counter, scrolling on his phone. Calm. Composed. He looked up and froze. There are expressions you can't rehearse. His face emptied before it rearranged itself. Ma? You're awake? His eyes flicked to my side. Then back to my face. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I leaned against the doorway and said, "What did you do?" 3 seconds passed. Maybe 4. Then he exhaled through his nose like I'd inconvenienced him. It was a controlled procedure. You're fine. Fine. That word landed strangely. Where? I asked. He hesitated. Just slightly. Private. That wasn't an answer. I stepped closer. Slowly. I didn't want him to see how carefully I was balancing my weight. You drugged me. He didn't deny it. He said, "You wouldn't have agreed otherwise." There it was. Not regret. Logic. I looked around the kitchen, at the refrigerator magnets, the spice rack, the worn groove on the table edge where Noah used to rest his arm, and it felt like I was standing inside someone else's memory. You sold it, I said. Marcus didn't flinch. You didn't need to. Same sentence. Upstairs earlier. Now to my face. I studied him then. Really studied him. His posture was upright. Shoulders squared. Not defensive. He believed he'd made a rational decision. How much? I asked. He didn't answer right away. His jaw tightened. That's not relevant. It was very relevant. I carried you for 9 months, I said quietly. You can tell me the number. 80. 80,000. He said it like a figure in a spreadsheet. I leaned back against the counter. The room felt narrower. My ears buzzed faintly. $80,000. That's what one of my kidneys was worth to him. I'm going to say something honest here. The physical pain wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing he had calculated my body as an asset. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you fed, someone you protected, you know there's a specific silence that follows. It's not loud. It's heavy. I felt it settle in my chest. I want to pause here and say something to you. If you've experienced betrayal from family, not gossip, not small lies, but something structural, you're not alone in that disorientation. It makes you question your own judgment before you question them. I questioned myself first. What had I missed? Marcus moved toward the sink. Washed his hands slowly. As if cleansing routine oil from his fingers. You'll recover, he said. Rafe arranged a real surgeon. Dr. Pike. He's discreet. Discreet. Not licensed. Not ethical. Just discreet. Where is it now? I asked. He glanced at me. Already placed. Placed. Like inventory. That word chilled me more than the amount. And then he added something that cracked the surface completely. It's not like it went to waste. The buyer needed it. The buyer. Who? I asked. Marcus hesitated. And in that hesitation, I saw something new. Uncertainty. He hadn't expected that question. You don't know them, he said quickly. That told me everything. Because Marcus loved details. He loved presenting complete narratives. If he was withholding a name, it was because the name mattered. Tell me, I said. No. He turned his back to me. That was the lowest point. Not the surgery. Not the money. The refusal. I stood there in my own kitchen, body altered, son unrepentant, and realized something cold and simple. I no longer knew the person in front of me. And I didn't yet know how far this went. But I was going to find out. I didn't scream at him. That surprised even me. There's a version of this story where I throw a plate, where I slap him, where I collapse into hysterics and demand justice in loud, dramatic waves. But that isn't what happened. I pulled out a chair and sat down. Slowly. My body needed it, yes, the incision throbbed in a steady pulse, but more than that, I needed stillness. Stillness makes other people uneasy. Marcus didn't sit. He hovered near the sink, arms folded now. Defensive posture. First one of the night. Is this about debt? I asked. He didn't answer. That's a yes. He inhaled sharply. It's not that simple. It rarely is. I folded my hands on the table so he wouldn't see them tremble. You sold part of my body for $80,000. You drugged me in my own kitchen. I think you owe me simple. That landed. He walked to the refrigerator, opened it, closed it without taking anything. A stall tactic. He used to do that when he was 12 and lying about homework. It was an opportunity, he said finally. Rafe connects people. There's demand. You're healthy. It was low risk. Low risk. I nodded once. Inside, something was rearranging. Not breaking, rearranging. Does Dr. Pike have a license? I asked. Marcus hesitated. That told me enough. I shifted in the chair and pain flared along my side. Sharp this time. I let it register. Didn't hide it. You said the buyer needed it, I continued. So you know who they are. He looked at me then. Directly. And for a second, just a second, I saw something flicker. Not guilt. Calculation adjusting. I wasn't told their identity, he said. That was cleaner. Too clean. I watched his pupils. They tightened. He was lying. I've spent years negotiating medical claims. People reveal more in their pauses than their words. Where did the surgery happen? I asked. Silence. In this house? I pressed. His jaw flexed. That was confirmation. A strange calm settled over me. You know when you step into cold water and after the initial shock, your body just accepts it? That's what this felt like. Acceptance. I stood up carefully. Walked past him. Into the hallway. Toward his room. Where are you going? He asked, sharper now. To see your setup. He moved to block me. That was new. Move, I said quietly. He didn't. So I looked up at him, not as a mother, but as a witness, and said, if I call the police right now, what do you think they'll find? His shoulders shifted. A crack. He stepped aside. His room smelled like electronics and something else, antiseptic, faint but present. The monitors were on. One screen showed a banking interface. The other, a messaging platform. He reached past me to minimize the windows. Too late. I saw the name. R. Ortega. And below it. Transfer confirmed. Recipient satisfied. Recipient satisfied. That phrase lodged in my chest. Satisfied with my kidney. I turned to Marcus. You didn't ask who needed it, I said. I didn't need to. That answer told me more about him than the crime itself. I sat on the edge of his bed. The mattress dipped. My incision tugged and I winced. Here's the moment that changed everything. Not anger. Not accusation. Clarity. If I reacted emotionally, he would pivot. He'd justify. He'd escalate. Maybe even disappear. But if I gathered proof quietly. $80,000 leaves trails. Wire transfers. Messages. Contacts. And he'd already involved a broker and a surgeon. People like that don't operate without records. Not completely. I looked up at him and said, "You're going to show me every message between you and Rafe?" He laughed. Short. Disbelieving. "You don't have leverage." I tilted my head slightly. "You're living in my house." Silence. That landed. "Now I want to be honest with you here. Some of you might think I should have called the police immediately. And maybe you're right. Maybe that would have been the moral high ground. But I wasn't thinking about morality first. I was thinking about control. If I handed this to authorities without understanding the full network, Marcus could frame it differently. Claim consent. Produce forged documents. Say I misunderstood. I needed the whole map. And I needed to know one thing above all. Who had my kidney? Because if the buyer was traceable, then this wasn't over. I stood carefully, facing him. "You will unlock your phone," I said. "Or I will make one call." He stared at me, trying to measure whether I was bluffing. I wasn't. And in that moment, I realized something unsettling. I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. I was preparing to dismantle whatever machine he had stepped into. Let me ask you something. If someone you loved crossed a line this severe, would you destroy them to protect yourself? Or would you try to pull them back from the edge? I didn't know yet which path I was choosing. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to be merchandise in my own story. Marcus didn't unlock the phone right away. He stared at me, jaw tight, thumb hovering over the screen like the decision weighed something more than pride. "Don't do this," he said. I held his gaze. "You already did." Silence stretched between us. The hum of his computer fans filled the room. Then he unlocked it. No speech. No drama. He handed it over. I didn't scroll wildly. I moved carefully. Conversations. Attachments. Transfer confirmations. A thread labeled simply Rafe. I opened it. Short messages. Efficient. Donor healthy. Private location confirmed. Surgeon on site 2200 hours. Balance wired upon extraction. Extraction. The word made my stomach turn, but I didn't show it. Who was the recipient? I asked without looking up. Marcus shifted behind me. I told you. I don't know. I kept scrolling. There. A line buried 3 days earlier. Recipient prefers anonymity. Family matter. Family matter. My pulse slowed. Family? I repeated. Marcus didn't answer. I looked up at him slowly. Who in our family needs a kidney? His silence gave him away before his face did. Marcus. He swallowed. For the first time that night, he looked uncertain. It's not what you think, he said. Those words. Always a prelude. I stood. The movement sent a sharp pull along my side and I gripped the desk for half a second, just half, before steadying myself. Say it, I told him. He exhaled hard. It wasn't random. I waited. It was Uncle Adrian. The room shifted. Adrian. My brother. No, half-brother. We shared a father. We hadn't spoken in years. I want to say 6, but it might have been 7. Time folds strangely around estrangement. Adrian is on dialysis, Marcus said quickly. He's been on a list forever. Rafe said this was faster. Faster. So they cut me open instead. You knew, I said quietly. Not asking. Marcus ran a hand through his hair. He reached out to me. Said you wouldn't agree if he asked directly. Said you were stubborn. I let out a slow breath. Adrian and I had history. Complicated doesn't even begin to cover it. We disagreed about money when our father died. Words were said. Doors closed. But I never wished him organ failure. You could have asked me, I said. You would have said no. You didn't give me the chance. He didn't argue that. The air in the room felt thinner. Some of you listening right now might think this makes it more understandable. That family saving family changes the equation. Maybe it does. But here's the thing. Consent still matters. I handed the phone back to him. Call him, I said. Marcus blinked. Now? Now. He hesitated again, smaller this time, and tapped the screen. It rang twice. Marcus? Adrian's voice came through faintly. I stepped closer and took the phone gently. It's me, I said. Silence on the other end. Then a breath. Shaky, Camora. His voice sounded weaker than I remembered. Thinner. You needed a kidney, I said. Another pause. I didn't know how to ask, he admitted. That part felt honest. You didn't ask, I replied. You arranged. He inhaled sharply. Marcus said. I know what Marcus said. The room felt very still. I could hear hospital equipment faintly in the background on his end. A monitor beeping. You're stable? I asked. Yes. There it was. Confirmation. I closed my eyes for 1 second. Alive. He was alive. Marcus watched me carefully, as if trying to calculate whether that fact would soften me. It didn't. You will come to this house tomorrow, I told Adrian. In person. Silence. Camora. In person. He agreed. I ended the call. Marcus stepped back slightly, uncertain now. What are you going to do? He asked. I met his eyes. Correct this. And I want to pause here because some of you may think I should have collapsed. Or forgiven immediately. Or called the police anyway. But in that moment, my mind was precise. They had taken something without asking. They believed the urgency justified the method. They believed I was the obstacle, not the participant. I wasn't going to shout. I was going to redraw the terms. I walked past Marcus toward the hallway. Tomorrow, I said calmly, we settle this. Behind me, for the first time all night, my son didn't have a reply. Adrian arrived the next afternoon. He didn't look like the brother I remembered from our 20s, broad shoulders, loud laugh, always certain he was right. He looked smaller. Skin pale against his collar. Movements careful, like his body had been negotiating with itself for a long time. Marcus hovered near the kitchen doorway but didn't sit. I stayed at the head of the table. The same table where I signed the papers. No raised voices. No accusations thrown like dishes. Just 3 adults and the weight of what had been done. Adrian kept his hands folded tightly in front of him. His nails were bitten down to the quick, he used to do that during exams in college. Funny what habits survive. I was dying, he said quietly. I didn't interrupt. Dialysis wasn't working well. The list, it's endless. Rafe told Marcus there was an option. He said it would be discreet. Safe. Safe. I almost corrected him, it wasn't safe for me, but I held it back. Did you know I wasn't asked? I said. He looked down at the table. I assumed you wouldn't agree, he admitted. Assumed. There's a difference between fearing rejection and avoiding the question altogether. I might have, I said. That wasn't entirely certain. I want to be honest about that. I don't know what I would have said if Adrian had come to me directly, explained the dialysis, asked for evaluation like a normal human being. Maybe I would have agreed. Maybe I would have refused. But it would have been my choice. And that's what they removed. Marcus finally spoke. It wasn't malicious. I looked at him carefully. Intent and impact are different currencies. You drugged me, I said. In my house. He swallowed but didn't argue. Adrian's eyes filled, not dramatically, just wet at the edges. I told him to make sure you wouldn't panic, he said. That detail shifted something inside me. You told him to sedate me? His silence confirmed it. The room felt heavier then. Not explosive. Just dense. For a moment, I wondered if I should stand up and leave. Let them sit in that silence alone. But my body reminded me I wasn't fully steady yet, so I stayed seated. Practicality sometimes shapes dignity. I won't involve the police, I said. Both of them looked up sharply. That decision had settled during the night. Not because they deserved mercy, but because the legal process would unravel everything publicly, the surgery location, the unlicensed arrangements, possibly even void Adrian's transplant follow-up. And here's the uncomfortable truth, I didn't want my kidney removed from him in court. It was already inside his body. What I wanted was accountability. You will transfer the full $80,000 back into my account, I told Marcus. Every dollar. He opened his mouth. I held up a hand. And you will sign a written admission of what happened. Detailed. Dates. Names. Amounts. Adrian looked startled. Why? Because if either of you ever attempt something like this again, I said calmly, I will not hesitate. The silence after that felt different. Structured. Marcus nodded slowly. It wasn't enthusiastic. It wasn't apologetic. It was recognition. Adrian's shoulders sagged slightly, as if he'd been bracing for something worse. There was a part of me, small but present, that wondered whether I was being too controlled. Too measured. Shouldn't I be angrier? Louder? But anger would not rebuild trust. It would only echo. When they left the table to draft the statement, I stayed behind. I touched the wood surface lightly. I asked myself a question I still sit with. If they had asked, honestly, vulnerably, would I have given it? I don't know. And if you're listening, I want you to consider your own answer. Not the ideal one. The real one. Would you sacrifice willingly for someone who once hurt you? Or does consent matter more than blood? By evening, the transfer was initiated. Papers signed. Copies stored in a lockbox upstairs. Marcus packed a bag. I'll find somewhere else to stay, he said. I nodded. I didn't stop him. As the front door closed behind him, the house felt quiet in a way it hadn't in months. Not empty. Just honest. I stood in the kitchen alone, one kidney lighter, one illusion gone. And I realized something important. I hadn't lost everything. But what I had lost would never grow back. It's been 11 months now. No, 10. I keep adding an extra month in my head, maybe because it feels longer than it's been. Healing stretches time. The incision scar has faded into a thin pale line along my left side. Some mornings it aches when the weather shifts. The doctor, a real one, this time, said that's normal with internal adjustment. Internal adjustment. That phrase fits more than just the surgery. Marcus hasn't moved back. We speak occasionally. Short calls. Practical topics. He transferred the full $80,000 within 3 weeks, just like I demanded. I used part of it to install security cameras and change every lock in the house. Not out of fear. Out of clarity. Adrian sends updates through email. Lab results. Numbers improving. He signs them, with gratitude. I read them. I don't always respond right away. I visited him once in person. Sat beside his hospital bed while he recovered. We didn't talk about the method. We talked about our father. About childhood summers. About things that existed before money and resentment complicated everything. I don't hate him. That surprises some people when they hear this story. Hatred would be easier. Cleaner. But life rarely gives you clean emotions. What was lost? Certainty. The quiet belief that being a mother guaranteed moral safety. What endured? My judgment. My steadiness. My ability to act without collapsing. What changed permanently? The way I define trust. Trust is no longer automatic in my house. It's negotiated. Earned in small increments. And here's something I've wrestled with: would I handle it the same way again? Would I still choose not to involve the authorities? I've turned that over many nights. Sometimes I think yes. Because the kidney is functioning. Because public exposure would have damaged more than it repaired. Other nights, I question myself. Maybe consequences should have been heavier. Maybe silence protects patterns. There isn't a tidy answer. If you were in my position, drugged, operated on without consent, yet knowing the organ saved your brother's life, where would your line fall? Is forgiveness separate from accountability? Can you rebuild connection after bodily betrayal? I don't pretend to hold universal wisdom. I only hold my own experience. Marcus told me recently, I thought I was being efficient. Efficient. That word still unsettles me. But he also said something else. I didn't think about your choice. I thought about the outcome. That, at least, shows growth. Late. Costly. But real. I've learned this. Love without boundaries invites exploitation. Boundaries without compassion turn you rigid. Somewhere between those two is dignity. I walk more slowly now. Not because I'm fragile, because I'm attentive. My body reminds me daily that it can be altered without warning. And yet I'm still here. Cooking in the same kitchen. Watering the same herbs. Sitting at the same table where I once signed something I didn't fully read. Only now, I read everything. Carefully. So let me leave you with this. When someone crosses a line so deeply that it alters your body or your life, do you rebuild, or do you remove them entirely? And how do you decide which response honors you? There isn't one right answer. There's only the one you can live with when the house goes quiet at night. So that's my story, folks. If it resonated with you, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far Camera's voice travels. Protect your heart, but never surrender your choice.